as you were starting to grow and you're building your team, what would you say were some of your key growth strategies, aside from networking, revisiting established relationships? Outside of that, what would you attribute to some of your growth and success?
You could call me the king of Toronto or the janitor of Toronto.
That's fine.
As long as you're happy in your career and making enough money to do what you need to do, I don't see the value in the title. And I think a lot of people my age and above feel the same way, but the younger generation, it's much more important to them. The hardest thing about being an entrepreneur or starting your own business is taking that leap of faith and just believing in yourself. I think so many people won't take that risk.
Good day and welcome to the Wealthy Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Gauvreau. It is great to have you with me here. I just want to remind you that this is the place where we dissect the elements that contribute to entrepreneurial success, from mindset and leadership to profits and revenue. Now, we've got a guest who's coming in today whose company is number 29 on the fastest growing companies list, according to the Globe and Mail, which is a fantastic accomplishment. And the firm is actually in recruitment. They focus on recruiting legal professionals and financial professionals, and they focus specifically on that niche. So this episode is going to be titled From Law to Leadership, Building a High Integrity Recruiting Firm with Brady Jones, who is the founder and managing partner of BJRC Recruiting, a boutique search firm specializing in the placement of top-tier professionals in executive, legal, and compliance, and finance and accounting roles, as I mentioned. Brady is a former lawyer on Bay Street and left the legal world to build a firm rooted in service, insight, and long-term results. Today, as I mentioned, BJRC is recognized as number 29 on the fastest growing companies list, with a team comprised of former lawyers, CPAs, and consultants. BJRC brings unmatched real-world expertise to every search engagement. I'm really excited to have Brady in here. They've had a lot of success. We're definitely going to speak to, what his business, what his entrepreneurial journey looks like, but also about what we as business owners should be thinking about when we're recruiting candidates and where we should be placing more value, whether it's in experience, your resume, or whether it's a cultural and communication fit. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brady Jones to the show today. Okay, today I'm really excited to invite Brady Jones into the show and to tell a little bit of his story. Now, Brady, before I get you to introduce yourself and sort of talk about your entrepreneurial journey, I just want to say, I love being able to connect with people who have been recognized on the Canada's fastest growing list. And you guys were number 29 in 2024. That's something I got to catch up to. We're a little bit farther down the list, but truly remarkable. Brady, I would love for you to maybe just share with everybody a little bit about your story, how you got started, and where you are today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bob, for having me on here. Yeah, I was a practicing lawyer on Bay Street for about eight years. I was getting pushed into partnership at the firm I was at and went to my wife and said, I don't want to be a partner on Bay Street. And she said, yeah, that's pretty obvious. You've never talked about your work. You seem pretty miserable coming home. So I knew I had to do something a bit different for the rest of my career. And an old friend of mine sort of put recruitment in my head as an idea. And decided to leave private practice and jump into recruitment, but in an area which I knew well, which is recruiting lawyers. So I made that leap about 6.5 years ago. What I liked about the idea about recruitment was, I could leverage my network of lawyers and people I knew in the city. And I liked, what I liked about law was business development, client development, meeting new people, and recruitment is just that. So got into recruitment about 6.5, 7 years ago. Started with a global recruitment business that had opened up a Toronto-based office. I opened their legal and regulatory compliance search group. Realized fairly quickly, about 6 months in, or about 6 months to a year in, that I didn't need a global brand behind me in recruitment, especially in the Canadian market, to be successful. So in February of 2020, started BJRC Recruiting. Started in my basement, in my little, I won't call it an office, but my little desk in the basement. And the good thing about recruitment is it's and I guess the reason why it's such a saturated market is, it doesn't take much to open a recruitment business. So opened my own shingle. 2 weeks later, COVID hit, and the recruitment world shut down for about 6 months. So I had a lot of sleepless nights, 2 young kids, mortgage and car payment, and the whole nine. And so it was pretty stressful. But especially law firms, once law firms realized, there was still a lot of work to do, and the markets were opened back up, things picked up fairly quickly, and that's sort of the story how we got started.
Well, that's fun. It's interesting. Your story is not too different than mine. I also worked at a large multinational firm, started to have those conversations about being partner, and thought, I'm not sure that this would be my choice. Now, I stuck in the same industry and you decided to get out completely. But how cool is it that you've changed, but you're still using your expertise in relating to that market, right? So that's a pretty unique sort of positioning strategically for you, being that lawyer who can talk to the other lawyers about the recruitment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think lawyers are a unique group of people, and I feel like if you haven't practiced law or at least been in a law firm or gone through law school, a lot of lawyers don't like opening up to you. So it was kind of by design that the first number of hires I made were former practicing lawyers. We now have eight former practicing lawyers recruiting on the legal and compliance side. So it's a unique set of people. On the finance accounting side, which is the other sort of vertical on our business, accountants don't really care where you come from, what you do. They'll chat with you, and if you have a good job to work on or a good opportunity for them, they're happy to chat with you. But lawyers are they're quite guarded, so it's hard to get through the door. So that's sort of why that came to be.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So when you got started, can you just share maybe some of the early wins as you got going? Like, obviously getting past COVID, that was a win, surviving through that at a time where everybody was saying, we're not hiring, we're downsizing, we're looking at that. But as you mentioned, very quickly in the professional services space, I feel like we were busier than ever, and it was trying to find people very quickly. So I'm hopeful for you that pain wasn't too long. But once it got up and rolling, what were a few things that worked really well for you as you got out of the gates?
So my business development sort of model and method is, I think, different. I'm not a trained salesperson. I'm a trained lawyer. So I think just using your existing network, people that know you, people that like you, continue to sort of let them know what you're doing and how you can help them without being pushy. I think it was able to, a lot of people sort of open the different doors or opportunities for me to work with them. And then I hired a few people on contract right when I got busy. So I think one of the big steps was going from a one-man recruitment business, of which there's thousands, to, hey, I'm getting busy. There's a vicious cycle in recruitment of you're trying to find roles to work on or searches to work on, but then you've got to spend all your time headhunting and finding the people. Once I got to that point, I said, I've got to hire a few people here to actually find the candidates while I manage the clients and find new roles to work on. So I think that was my first sort of big win and sort of the first big step into growing a business was, having I don't know if it was foresight or luck, but, hiring 2 young former practicing lawyers to join my team, really on contract. The first person I hired actually was in between her summer and articles and starting as a first year associate. I just said, hey, you've got a 4-month gap. Why don't you work with me? If you're successful, I pay you commission on our fees. And I hired a few people like that even before I hired, the more established sort of permanent people. So I think that was my first win, was taking all of the headhunting part off my plate so I could continue to try and bring in new business.
And so as you were starting to grow and you're building your team, what would you say were some of your key growth strategies aside from networking? I know you mentioned that, going back into your network and revisiting established relationships. Outside of that, what would you attribute to some of your growth and success?
I think just keeping an open mind, to be honest. When I started the business, I had a little notepad with all of the ideas I had, and we were a legal recruitment only. I was only going to hire lawyers, and I think basically I kept on getting calls from my clients saying, "Hey, can you recruit a controller for me? Can you recruit a director of finance for me? Hey, I need a CFO." And I kept on referring this work over to a friend of mine who's now my business partner, but he got in recruitment around the same time I did from a corporate strategy world. He worked for some of the big pension funds. And I was referring so much work to him. Eventually, he just said, "Why don't I, come work with you and build a finance accounting group?" So I don't know if it was a BD thing. It was more just, I had an idea that my business was only going to be a legal recruitment firm. And I just kept on, the way I looked at it, as I was throwing revenue away, and why not bring this in-house? So I think once, about a year and a half into starting BJRC Recruiting, I brought in Patrick Johnson's his name, a partner, to lead out and grow a finance accounting search group. And I think right now we're the only boutique recruitment firm in Canada that's got those two business lines. So I don't know if that's BD, but it's more just, hey, like thinking outside the box. It's maybe this isn't just going to be a legal recruitment business. How can we grow this a bit differently?
Have you read the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan? Because this is pretty much what he talks about. Like, it's not about how you're going to grow. It's about who it is that you're going to grow with, or who is going to be that person. So finding that partner seems like it was a pretty strong position for you guys to capitalize on what was already there, but also to position yourself as that boutique professional services recruitment firm. That's pretty great.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a bit of luck. I'd known Pat since he's a bit younger than me, but I've known him since we were both at the same high school. We'd always just sort of run into each other. And yeah, we found out we were both got into recruitment around the same time and sort of reconnected and we're chatting. But I think it was a bit of luck. But looking back now over the past 3.5 years or 4 years almost, don't know if I'd want to grow a business on my own without anyone sort of having skin in the game and really someone I can rely on and trust completely, because his interests are totally aligned. I think it's been a lot more fun, and I think we've been a lot more successful. And sort of my mentality with that was, I'm okay having a smaller piece of the pie if it can be a better business. And I think that's what's happened.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the business. Aside from the specialization, I understand you have a fairly robust screening process for your candidates. Can you walk me through what that looks like?
What we're trying to do is create. We're not an executive search firm, so we're not trying to compete with Korn Ferry and Egon Zehnder and sort of they call them the Shrek firms, the big generally US-based retained recruitment businesses. But we don't want to be like an agency that's just shopping around CVs. So I think in terms of the screening process, what we're trying to do is, if we're working on a legal search, we have a former lawyer screening these people. So we really dive into their roles in the past, why they've moved. We sort of fact check the candidates. If we know that they've been at places we know people at, we'll sort of call behind the scenes and make sure that the moves they made were actually for the reasons they gave us. And we'll go into diving into some of their transactions they've worked on, or some of the litigation files they've worked on, and in what capacity. And it's given that we've got people that have worked in the industry, we have a leg up on our competition in that sense. And I think we do give more. What we're trying to do is give a executive or retained search quality of candidate to our clients, but at a contingent search level. And I think that's gone a long way. I don't necessarily think we're doing anything in addition to screen the candidates than some of the retained search firms, but we're definitely doing a deep dive into these people, and we're not just having phone calls with them. It used to be I used to meet with all the candidates for a coffee or face to face. With COVID, we've been a lot more efficient in that there's all the video call platform, but we do say we do meet with all of our candidates either on a video call or in person before we send them to our clients as well.
And it sounds like maybe you've got a little bit different approach, where it sounds like you're more so working for the firm versus the candidate, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like at the end of the day, we get paid by the firm or the business, so they are our client. We're really a broker. It's kind of like we need to make sure both sides are happy, and we don't want to misrepresent the candidates, but we want to make sure the candidates we're representing are strong, are good, aren't going to flake out. There's not much. There's not all you can do. Like there's a lot. There's times where a candidate we're working with takes a counter offer from their current business or chats with their partner and decides not to move. There are things that happen, but yes, it's we do like to think we go sort of one step up on our competitors.
And so how much, just, thinking of a team that's growing and constantly looking at how we can do better with recruitment, how much do you put culture and communication style into that sort of placement and the right fit?
We try and get as much out of our clients as we can in terms of what you're asking about, like the cultural fit for our clients or within my team? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're looking at placing an individual and you're looking at the firm, yeah, they might have the right background and the right experience, but when we're looking at the actual placement, do you really dive deep into, is this a good cultural fit? Because I feel, from my perspective, I feel like if the culture is not aligned, then that placement may not be as successful, even though they might be the ideal candidate on paper.
For sure. There are personality assessments and things that are done. A lot of our clients don't want us to put candidates through that. So if we're on a call with our client and they tell us the type of person and personality they're looking for, we do our best. We'll have, another list of personality or cultural based questions about what this person is like, what they're looking for. We'll ask those questions on our reference checks that we're doing on the candidates. It is difficult. It is difficult to really assess if it's a cultural fit, especially, if we haven't, been in the office of our client and talked to the executive team or talked to the hiring managers to really know if it's going to be a fit. I'd say what we try to do a better job of is find them the right background or experience and send them 3 or 4 or 5 great candidates that have the right experience who may have the right cultural fit. And we let the client sort of say, okay, all these people can do the job. Who do we think is the best for our team specifically? That's kind of the most we can hope for. We let sort of the client make that call.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thinking of some other items that I want to touch on, what are top tier organizations looking for in 2025 and beyond as far as finding the right candidate?
I think it's funny. It depends on the level. I think the more junior profiles or junior candidates that sort of got their CPA letters or their call to the bar in and around 2020 to 2022 are really struggling. We've had clients ask us to not, they're either going to go, hire people that are a bit older or a bit younger than that sort of 2-year period. I think for a variety of reasons, but mainly the training, as a young accountant or young lawyer, they didn't get the training they deserved or should have got during COVID. No one was in the office. They didn't really have mentorship. A junior person can't really call a senior partner or executive member of their business. You forget how much you learn just sort of sitting next to someone. So I think to be honest, a lot of businesses are looking for, if it's a younger profile or a younger sort of person to join their team, they're looking for someone who's young and hungry to be in the office 5 days a week and really soak up the knowledge that they need and experience they need from, the people that have been in the industry for a while. So I think it's a red flag for us when there's a junior level candidate who says they only want to be in the office once a week. That's probably a problem. And at a more senior level, it really is dependent on what the search is and what type of personality and what type of experience each client's looking for. It's really hard to say sort of an exact profile.
Yeah, interesting. And that would be in line with what our experience has been too, right? From the CPA side of thing, from the finance side, any of our juniors, if they're going to be successful, they've got to be in person They've got to have a mentor. They've got to have somebody that they can be working with. Really hard for them to tap somebody on the shoulder in a virtual environment and to make sure that, all of the body language sort of indicators that they're struggling or succeeding, you just can't pick up on that in the same way in person. And then on the opposite, once they've hit a certain level of experience and they've hit a senior sort of level, their independence and being able to work from home and have flexibility works great. And for someone like our firm that's in the Peterborough area, it's harder to find in-person people. We can grab people right out of university, multiple universities in the area, which is great. But finding senior people in Peterborough is more challenging. So we definitely cater to the online environment once they're able to work independently. So yeah, that sounds exactly like where we're at. How would you see the landscape of the legal compliance and executive recruitment changing as you move forward? There's a lot of change in the demand for employees and flexibility. How do you see that from a recruitment standpoint going forward?
Yeah, I think there's going to continue to be a high demand. We saw a bit of a dip in the recruitment market, and I think in all markets across the board with Trump coming in the U.S. and the tariffs looming and sort of the question of what's going to happen. So I think that a lot of our clients sort of put things on pause, and a lot of the big law firms that have been hiring like crazy for the past 5 years are now more timid. They're making sort of more direct, specific niche hires than just, let's find 5 more M&A lawyers. So things have changed. I think I don't think there's going to be, in the long term, I don't think there's going to be a change in the market in terms of the demand. I think companies will always need talent with more online presence of candidates and LinkedIn continuing to grow and things like that. I don't think that's going to make it easier for businesses to find talent on their own. So, I think if it might be harder, if you're a well-known business in a big city, you could get 1,000 applicants. It's impossible for, I guess it's possible for someone to comb through all those applicants, but especially when it comes to, a specialized role like a lawyer or an accountant, the HR talent acquisition groups within these companies aren't really qualified, in my opinion, to assess, from a CV if it's the right fit. So, I don't think that, we're going to see any dip in sort of the demand for recruitment, specialized recruitment firms.
Have you started to see any sort of relief from that Trump chaos that was created, that fear that he put into everybody on the recruitment side? Are people starting to hire a little bit more again?
Yeah, we picked up for sure. Like our business is industry agnostic. So I haven't seen this with all of our sort of manufacturing type clients, but for sure, like if you're in the steel industry or auto industry, there's, you're probably not recruiting as much as you were last year, but that doesn't mean that the tech industry is not doing well or financial services or real estate. So we haven't seen much of a dip other than now that we still don't know what Trump's doing, I guess, but now that
he doesn't know what he's doing one day from the next, I don't think.
Now that people have realized like he's probably not going to do anything too drastic in terms of tariffs across the board for all of our whole export economy, I think things have sort of loosened up a bit for sure.
Absolutely. It's been an interesting time, that's for sure. Well, for sure, thinking of legal and financial experts, really some pretty recession-proof clientele as well, right? Which is kind of nice. And, I'm grateful to be in a fairly recession-proof business. Although I do have some of my clients that, do struggle in times of recession. They do pull back their purse strings a little bit in their investments and whatnot, but there's always new businesses coming into the market to sort of fill that gap as well. So nice selection, by the way. Great.
Yeah, like I've said this a number of times over the years. I think you got to be a bit lucky too. I didn't when I sort of brought when I started just the legal search. Fine, that makes sense for me. But when I brought in the finance accounting, I didn't know how many synergies there'd be between the two, but also didn't realize that they're probably the two most risk adverse roles or groups of roles that you'd have in a business. If times are tough, you're not cutting, the accountants, you're cutting the sales team, you're cutting the marketing teams. So it's been it's worked out well, but I think kind of by luck.
So thinking on the candidate side, are you seeing a lot of different individuals make strategic career changes at this point? Like with everything that's been going on in 2020, I think everybody reevaluated, like yourself, reevaluated what is it that I really want? Are you finding a lot of people are exploring those strategic career changes?
Yeah, I think what we find is we'll chat with someone who's either tired of the industry or career they're in, and they're looking for a change, or they're foreseeing this industry's doesn't have legs, or something. I don't think this is going to work, and they're really thinking of they'll be thinking of getting jumping from the automotive industry into a different manufacturing industry, so that more strategy in that side. I think a lot of people are still moving for title changes and compensation. At the end of the day, everyone's got to look after themselves first. And if we have a client who's going to offer someone, a 30 or 40% pay increase, I don't think that's strategic. I think that's just, they're going to make the move.
Now, compensation is one thing for sure. If there's going to be that big of a jump, it's pretty hard to say, hey, I blame you for this. You're getting paid substantially more for doing the same job. I get that. What is happening with this title recognition situation? Because we see it too, where it's like that all of a sudden is one of the most important things for people to be recognized amongst their peers. And it becomes almost this, there's not enough titles to put in place to continuously recognize people.
Yeah. And I think I do, not to, I'll say the younger generation, I think it's more important to them.
We're seeing that too.
Yeah. So, every year or every 2 years, I would be lucky, but like every year it seems that, the younger generation wants to be recognized and wants a different title. In my opinion, if you could call me the king of Toronto, or
or the janitor of Toronto,
that's
fine.
As long as you're happy in your career and making enough money to do what you need to do, I don't see the value in the title, but I think a lot of people at my age and above feel the same way. But the younger generation, it's much more important to them. I don't know if it's because they want to show their peers, or their online presence has always been so much more, and it makes them feel more valued. But it's definitely a big sticking point. We lose out on and especially larger organizations that have titles that they have to stick to for an org chart. We've lost out on closing candidates in new roles because they want a senior manager title, and their client can't put them at that level because they only have X amount of years of experience. So we've seen it to be an issue for sure.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that we're very conscious of those moves, because as soon as we make one title shift, you've got 20 other people going, where's my title change? I've been here longer. I put in more hours. I generate more revenue. And it definitely becomes challenging, because unless we're redefining our titles and creating multiple layers, there aren't that many title changes that you can have in your iteration or your evolution in the firm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and internally, within BJRC, we have that issue as well. We're a really young team, and people work hard and do really well, and they want to feel valued, and it's a thing where we're constantly working with our employees to try and find them the right title to make them sort of happy and feel valued.
One of the things, and this is just for anyone who's listening in this entrepreneurial space, feeling this right now, we've been feeling this same thing that Brady's talking about for the last, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years. And one of the things that we've done to help mitigate that to a certain extent is we've created a higher culture of internal recognition, and we've sort of formalized the internal recognition process where we have this. There's a bunch of different ways that we do it, but we have a formalized shout out process, and we recognize people who are shouting others out and also those that are getting shouted out. And we have it almost as a little bit of a competition with a financial reward, because I do feel like it is an element of feeling valued and being recognized for their contributions. So we've tried to expand on how we communicate that with everybody to keep everybody engaged and feeling valued, so that it's not constantly coming back to the title pool as well, which is challenging for sure. Brady, I gotta ask, so what's next for BJRC? Where are you guys headed in the next 5 years?
That's a good question. We opened a Montreal office last year, so we have two employees in Montreal. They're both former practicing lawyers. They're both francophones. So unfortunately I don't speak French, which is I didn't know that was going to be important until I started a recruitment business. So yeah, we've grown in Montreal. We've been doing some work in the UK. We're looking into the Caribbean. We've done a fair amount of work in the US now as well. I'm not really sure what would be next. I think in 5 years, if we have some people in Calgary who are recruiting sort of on the West Coast, I'd like to see that. But if things go well and continue to go well in the US or the Caribbean, I could see us being in those markets as well. That would be sort of the goal. I think in terms of BJRC, as a group, I want to continue to expand. I think we have a good model internally for our recruiters to grow and make a lot of money and be happy. And I think I'd like to be double the size in the next 5 years. So that's sort of the goal, I'd say.
Well, that's pretty great, pretty ambitious and pretty great, but hey, ambitious for someone who's number 29 on the fastest growing companies list in Canada. I think you've got it under control. One last question I'll have for you. So what advice would you have for anybody who's maybe looking to make that entrepreneurial leap and is contemplating it? What sort of guidance, as someone who's done that, could you give them?
It's funny. I've had some close friends and acquaintances ask me that over the last few years, and I don't really feel like an entrepreneur, so it's kind of a funny. It makes me smile just being asked that question. I think the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur or starting your own business is taking that leap of faith and just believing in yourself. I think so many people won't take that risk. I think for people who have taken that leap of faith and have failed, I don't think they regret the fact they tried. So I think the first step would be, if you think you've got a good idea or you think you've got a way to get into a saturated market like recruitment where you can make a company a bit differently or a bit better, you just do it. I think worry about if it's going to work out long term later. You'll be happier being your own boss, taking your own risks. And if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's so true.
Right? Like if you give it a year or a year and a half or 2 years, and if it hasn't worked, if you're a hardworking, smart person, you can always go back to the industry you were in, probably even the job you were in. So take the risk.
And it is going to take time, right? Like to your point, it is going to take a little bit of time for everything. You're not going to just get on the rocket ship and head into space immediately. You've got to do the training. You've got to go through the process first. You've got to get some things established. But yeah, completely agree. Taking that leap is the hardest part. But if you believe in yourself and you know what you're capable of, and you've had some form of success in the past in whatever it is that you've done, the idea would be that you would likely be able to create another form of success in the future. Love that. Well, Brady, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing a little bit about BJRC, some insights for where the market is going. I think for many of us, we're continuing to hire people and look at trends and what we should be looking for when we're hiring the right candidates. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and certainly look forward to watching the growth of your firm as you continue to expand across the globe.
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Guys, this has been the Wealthy Entrepreneur Podcast. As you know, we're here to empower entrepreneurs with the financial confidence to make informed decisions so that together we can make a positive impact on the world. Now, we've talked about all things recruitment, and we've shared a fantastic entrepreneurial journey story. In fact, number 29 on the Globe and Mail's fastest growing companies list in Canada, which is pretty incredible. There's been lots of insights that have been shared. Please like those, leave comments. Happy to answer any questions you have. But most importantly, if you know somebody who is struggling with the recruitment process, or you've heard some insights from Brady that he shared that you think would be valuable to those individuals, please share this with them. Again, we're here to help as many people as we possibly can. Once again, if you like this episode, make sure you give us a like, give us a follow so that you can have access to our next released episode. We release an episode every single week. And I am your host, Bob Gauvreau. It is a pleasure to have you with me. Look forward to seeing you next time.